Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ICE Global webinar series. And we're really glad to have you here. We're just kicking off our new live webcast, um, method here. So we're just getting going in how to get everybody on and let everybody know. There you can see me. Oops, I'm streaming on my own screen there. So I'm gonna give a short. We'll be, recording all of this, and we'll get a short kind of overview about the webinar series and what we've done and what we're building out, and where you can access it. And then our speaker Bryce will be joining us to talk about service design. Again, all of these streams will be recorded. We'll be bringing in lots of different features for this, the ability to chat, the ability to vote, the ability to follow up inside of ISA communities. And I think what I'm most excited about is exactly that. We are really dedicated to bringing um, the architect professional community to life. Many of you may have different access to different kinds of the different kinds of communities, whether they're software architects or they're infrastructure architects or they're solution architects, um, business architects, etc. But ICE is the only place where we bring all of those together. And I wanted to take this first portion of the conversation before Bryce starts to actually start chatting a little bit about the notion of what that community is coming together on, and what we're trying to build. So the idea, of course, of ISA is to build out a body of knowledge that is, and let me just share this. Wow, that's a problem with having multiple browsers, right? Is the figuring out which one is which one is live at what time. Um, so what we've done over the last year and a half is consolidate our tool set. And for those of you who found this event, of course, you found the event through, the either through LinkedIn or through our newsletter or through our events. But I did want to let you know that all of these events will be recorded and available in the video section, the calendar section. You'll find all the upcoming events in that space. And this is all at education.isaglobal.org. I can't be more excited about this suite of tools. We have 100 authors already and more. We hope you'll become an author and become a contributor to the Bitterbuck or to our learning journals or our webinar series. And hopefully we'll be, sharing more and more content there. We have an entire body of knowledge available to you in the Bitterbuck. It's all open source, it's all free. The the um, the pattern library, the deliverables, the key concepts, the skills of an architect, views and viewpoints, as well as a growing amount of training. And I want to mention Bryce, who I believe I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. Let's just get Bryce in here. Hey, Bryce.
Hello, can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. We are
Great.
live and in charge. I think we have a couple people on. We're getting used to the new webinar series methods, the streaming platform live. So, Bryce, I'm glad you could do the first live one with us. Um, I'm just showing off. Bryce has a course coming up in the end of the year. It'll be integration architecture. You'll be able to find that on the ISA calendar, as well as we'll be hosting some of his interviews with chief architects and a number of other sessions. So do check back regularly. We've got about 6 events to upload into to upload here soon, and so you'll be seeing those quite all over the place. we'll be sharing those throughout the membership, etc. So thank you for joining, Bryce. How are you? Let me just turn off my screen.
Well, I'm doing really good. I'd like to do one last run through, so I feel a little bit like the Guess Who when they came up with American Woman today, and that I was just about to do my last run through before we went live, and then the time zone had me an hour earlier. So this is like this will be unplugged.
Yeah, this was a time zone challenge on multiple levels. Have half of the staff is in the U.S., half of the staff is in Europe, and then there's some staff members in Asia, and like we're trying to figure out which time zone should rule them all. But anyway, I'm just glad you could be here. If we were going to mess up a live stream, I wanted it to be with you, right? In the sense of being, I know that you and I get along amazingly well, so that we can,
Thank you.
and we can, there was a great scene in West Wing where the president says to one of Toby or one of the guys, like, if you're gonna screw up, I want to see you screw up going full speed. I want to see like a Toby-sized hole in the wall because you just didn't slow down, right? And I was like, so much of life feels like that, doesn't it? Anyway, but we're here to talk about service design, and this has been a big topic for a while. So, I'm obviously, having read the book and commented on the book, I want to recommend for everybody that they take a look, and we'll show Bryce's book at the end here, just a little screen capture where you can get a copy. And otherwise, though, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you do services? What is a service model? And I have to admit, I looked at the canvas and I'm intrigued, right? Because it's business models, but it's different. What is
It
a
extends
service?
it, And just before I get started, can you see my screen there right now?
I can turn it on as soon as we get to the presentation, but we'll do a little, just a little chat,
Yep.
and then I'll flip it on and flip
Yep.
my view off so that I can listen.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this in Digital Momentum, and really what we're seeing in our world is a move from products to a customer outcome-oriented perspective. And, when Osterwalder came up with the original business model canvas, he captured a lot of great stuff. And I think he was looking at, some, nice categorization of what do you put in that business model.
Mm-hmm.
But as you start to go from a customer perspective, it loses a lot that we need to add to. And the whole approach with this canvas, it's based on Monticello. It extends it for architects. So we're not going to exactly follow his model 100%. We want to build it out in a way, though, that emphasizes the customer touch points, the use of ecosystems, and what's happening in the real world, this gradual shift, and moving away from a product focus. And I've got a couple of stories. I got probably one of the most exciting stories, and it's very pertinent now with the release of flying saucer and aerial phenomena technology. So I'll cover that a little bit later.
Well, this is interesting to me because obviously, as technologists, we're used to and as consumers, we're used to buying a pair of tennis shoes, not a tennis shoes service. But as technologists, we're heavily involved in the life cycle of a product engagement, whether that's a support or it has a sensor data in it. Your watch isn't just a watch anymore. It's all it's all sorts of services that you use, and Apple has really been able to capitalize on that.
And that's a great example, Paul, right? Like if you look at something like a Tesla or a modern car, I mean, you start to look at it and you start to say, okay, this car is, and in a sense, it's still a product, right? If you look at how they build the cars now, I was in a really interesting discussion with the vice president of Hyundai Motors. And he said the first thing they look at now is the ecosystem and the software. That comes even before the car body design. And yes, there's those physical product elements of it. You're still driving a car, but there's those digital elements too, those services that can integrate with that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this before you got started, because it is such a critical question going forward. How do you think we do this and we augment our customer experience and not degrade it in the sense of like, well, yeah, I had somebody joke the other day that they were going to have to pay monthly to be able to roll down their windows. Yeah. And like, the monthly service fee so that you can do window wiping, when it rains. Like, how do you keep from the degradation of service based on and product quality based on this model, in your opinion? What's the magic there to make it better, um, for both parties? Obviously obviously the inventors need to generate value as well, but obviously the customer centric side of this is the thing I think is what I love about your focus, right?
Well, and there's no secret. That's exactly what it is. It's the customer focus. That is the secret sauce. If you look at the original business model canvas, the right part of it, and we'll talk about this in the discussion a little bit more, was about how does this product get viewed from the customer's perspective? We're
Hmm.
flipping that around to how does the customer view our products in terms of what they want to do? So it's the same elements, but they're flipped around, and that is the secret sauce. And you know, um, we'll probably bring this up again a bit later, but a great example, if you went through somebody like Wendy Keen's strategy to execution and business architecture, you would look at a business model canvas for a business unit. You would say, how do I build out the products that this business unit produces? You might even produce a business model canvas per product. When we flip it around, we start looking at customer segments as the base unit, and it changes the way we think about it. And that is the secret sauce.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great transition point. I'm gonna
Okay.
turn on the Bryce presenter and turn off the Paul headshot so that you can have the stage, and
Okay.
then we'll come back for questions at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to talking with everybody. Please do note your questions so we can capture them at the end. Um, when we look at the move from products to outcomes, this is a pretty significant change that's taking place in our world today. And it's not happening like, oh, all of a sudden we go from products to a digital world. It's going to happen gradually. And so we want to be able to address those things. And that's really what the seminar is about. And these are many of the concepts that I write about in my book, Digital Momentum. Today, we're going to discuss one particular tool that I used. I didn't elaborate very deeply in the book specifically on this canvas, but it is one of the tools that I used to build some of the examples out. And it's one of the tools going forward that I use in practical strategic planning and using these concepts in the real world. So we're going to start with the ideas of Osterwalder, looking at the business model canvas. We're going to make a few observations as architects about it, and then we're going to move on to the Ogesella model and extend that one even further to make sure we capture the key elements. So this is the seminar from products to outcomes and the transition that we are involved with. Who is this webinar for? If you need to take into account customer service logic and the outcomes, and you need to plan for that, you need to build an architecture on that, this is for you. There's really three things that you're going to be finding that you get out of this seminar that are really interesting. One, how do I better understand the customer? Two, what do I do in an ecosystem? And that can be a mixed ecosystem with other customers and agents. And also, this sets the foundation for people that are going to be working with agentic AI and want to empower those agents. It was interesting. Somebody said, oh, do you ever envision a day when you're going to be able to actually do anything without a person involved? And I had to think about that. And then I went and ordered something on Amazon and just did it. So that day's here. It's just a question of where the person is in the loop, right? And where the guardrails are. Who this is not for. This is not a deep technical dive, although developers and engineers can benefit from this. This is going to be focusing on value efficiency. We're not going to be looking at operational efficiency either. So why this matters, we really, from a customer perspective, there's three things when we go from products to outcomes. The first thing is that I think when we started looking at products, organizations designed around those products, they said, what was the view that the customer had in terms of that product? We're flipping that around to what does the customer need? And that can change the way they look at a product. So one application here is to use this to get a better, more customer-friendly approach to dealing with a product. The second one is when you look at ecosystems and we go from products to outcomes, we realize that customers engage with other customers. Customers might engage with agents. They might engage with other organizations that could either be live or again, artificial AIs. So how do we deal with ecosystems and what changes? So we're going to touch on that and why a different type of canvas is needed to capture the interests of specific customer segments. And third, this is a foundation that really starts to look at how do we implement ecosystems and how do we shift our thinking to look at the different roles in the ecosystem and empower our agents to act in those roles, and maybe in encounter strategies where we can move how they act. We might be starting an agent, might be just a supplier, but it might be with the mind to become something bigger and less commoditized in that thing, and the service model canvas can help with that. So let's look at some of the principles for service dominant logic. Essentially, there are three principles, I guess, here. One, if we look at this as an evolution, we started to ask, how do we get our product out to deliver it to the customer? Service dominant logic flips that. It's how, as a customer, do I use this? How do I navigate the ecosystem, and how do I co-create value? So my outcome might have input from multiple people. I might be going on I might be buying a Tesla, like we talked about earlier on, right? And I may want to add features to that Tesla that add value that are unique to me, right? Service dominant logic shifts the way that we think about this. And it recognizes that modern value is dependent on the context of use. It's also dependent on the outcomes we want. And there's two aspects that we're going to capture in our canvas on that. One is the context, very specific context of me using something. And the other one is, am I in an ecosystem that I enjoy? There's a social element we want to capture. And these combine also into this idea that value is more than just a thing. It's more than just a hammer. If you like to think of it, it's like the hammer club. There's people I can talk to. I can get excited about it. I might have a red flaming hammer that I want that's unique, that I'm able to bring out differently. So these are some of the principles. Again, customer logic. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get to an outcome or multiple outcomes. And ecosystem logic. How do I as a customer navigate that? As a company, do I help orchestrate and facilitate that customer journey to do that? So let's take a race back through time to the original business model canvas by Osterwalder. And this is the representation. If we look at it at a high level, you notice that there's actually four major areas in this canvas. The one on the right is about customers and how they deal with customer experiences, how the customer experiences value. And we talk about it from a value proposition point of view. I have a product that they're going to look at, and they have the single product that they need to evaluate. And how do I make that available to them? What relationships do I do to get to the customer? What channels do I use to enforce those relationships? And how do I build those customer relationships to get our second major component, which is a value proposition, where the customer sees some value in the product. So this idea with Osterwalder is we're trying to get for the product a value proposition. On the left side, we talk about key partners, key activities, and key resources, which is really the operational component of the business model canvas. And what's kind of interesting here, by the way, is if you look at this and you're actually doing practical work with this, a lot of people notice that the key activities really starts to coincide with some of the capabilities. And if you think about it, what's a capability? It's people, product, and technology. So there's kind of an overlap there with key activities and key resources. And we'll capture that going forward when we talk about capabilities. And I think the reason Osterwalder did this way is he was working from Macy as an organizing principle, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. What are all the categories that I need for my business model? Not necessarily from an architecture lens, where you look at as a capability as a packaging of people, process, and technology. And then we have key partners. In a product world, that's really simple. I maybe have a supplier, I have this or that. In the ecosystem world, it's much more dynamic. And then finally, the fourth part to this is the bottom, is the cost structure. How much does it cost? And what kind of revenue am I looking at? How do I build that model out? And that's really, if we look at this, understanding the business model canvas. So how does this differ from how does this traditional canvas What's different about it when we compare it to the service model and what we need to understand with services? Well, the first thing is the traditional canvas doesn't look at the customer experience contextually. It doesn't look at what the customer is really trying to do and understand, right? And how they're using the product. Maybe it is, no, don't get me wrong. Sometimes they elaborate on that, but it's not meant to do that. So what we want to do is understand the customer better with the service model. Well, we're even going to talk about things like understanding the customer's mental model of what they want to do and understanding their journey. And we use a tool for this, customer journey mapping, which is really heavy on experience mapping. It's not the traditional canvas is not outcome oriented. We want to go to outcome orientation. So how do I get to drive my Tesla? Not I'm going to buy a car or a hammer. It's I want to be using it. How do I enjoy it? How do I get the ongoing value? And so this is another thing that differs, is that there's a lot of consideration in ongoing value. The traditional canvas ignores the ecosystem. It looks at buying the product and then using the product. And there is some elements of it, ecosystem. There's like user clubs and stuff like that, but it's not focused that way. So we need to add that focus in. Governance is not part of the business model canvas. I would argue, and we're not going to talk a lot about this today, but I would argue that as you move towards an ecosystem kind of model, governance now needs to be embedded, but it can't be like slow. And I'm not talking about, the favorite. I think when people think about governance, a lot of times they think about bureaucracies going through and coming up with governance principles. It's taking forever to make decisions. No, that's not what we're talking about. We want to flip that around, and that governance enables somebody to realize their vision and their dreams. And the traditional canvas is very limited in its outcomes by design. The service model is about opening up ideas and outcomes. So with that having been said, let's sort of think about this use in context. A great example, Microsoft has done a lot of work to make your laptop valuable to you. But let me ask you, who here, when your house is burning down, is going to go in to try to grab your laptop as your first thought? Context changes everything. And that really brings out the difference between service and a product. Products are very replaceable. A lot of the outcomes aren't. And for me, my house burns down. The first thing I'm going to do is get the things that I care about out first, the people and my pets, to make sure that they're safe. Very different contextually than trying to save maybe even $1 million laptop with the newest quantum chip in it. When we talk about this idea of what we want to deal with, I think it's important to realize that we're talking about human feelings and emotions. And I use this concept called the North Star vision. We're not going to talk about it a lot, but it is important to capture the emotional and the ultimate state that I want in terms of what it really means to me, not in terms of the product. And I'm going to provide an example. And this happened early in my career. I was working with Price Waterhouse Emerging Technology Center. And I was on a plane going from, it was San Francisco to San Jose. And the guy sitting next to me on the plane was an engineer on the Apollo space program. And currently, when I was talking to him, he was also working in Area 51. So I had to ask the question. He said, look, I know you're not going to be able to maybe give me the right answer, but tell me, you're working in Area 51. Have we reverse engineered an alien spacecraft? And his answer was more profound than if he would have just said that there was alien spacecraft there. He looked at me and he said, you came onto this plane with an Osborne luggable. Could you have ever envisioned 5 years ago walking onto a plane with a computer that small? And my mindset at the time was in terms of the Osborne luggable. And the answer was no, I couldn't look at that Osborne luggable really having evolved from a microchip or a big, microcomputer. But what I could have imagined is that I wanted a smaller, more portable computer. If I could have captured those needs into something that meant something to me as a customer, the trajectory of the future was far more predictable. If I look at the fact that I want technology to be easy to use and I want it to be part of my everyday environment, it's not hard to see a role for something like Alexa from Amazon making my world easier because I want better entertainment. If I start to think in terms of a specific movie and try to imagine the future, it becomes very hard. And that's what this idea of a North Star vision is. It's trying to capture in a document the feeling of what I think I want things to look like at a point in time in the near future. It's an idea that I loosely derived from work I did at Microsoft with a concept they called the Book of Dreams, where they would show executives these glossy pictures of a future world, and they would get all excited about what the technology could do. And then we would use that to drive out the business modeling. This is a very similar idea. It's about what's that emotional experience going to look like and how can I imagine it? So a lot of times we'll start our work in our service canvas by building something like a North Star vision that we can use for the service model. And there's other accomplices. One thing we like to focus on when we look at the customer is what's different about them and other customers. How do we find strategic differentiation? I find I use Blue Ocean Strategy quite a bit to understand that, as well as other tools like the customer journey, understanding the service blueprint. We want to understand who's providing what, and these tools become first-class citizens that actually feed the service canvas. So what does this service canvas actually look like? There it is. It's the Ojicello, and this is not 100% based on Ojicello. I can just really quickly capture some of the original differences, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Essentially, where we see box 5, relationships and engagement, he put a value component in there. I decided to extend this a little bit differently, putting more emphasis on the touch points, and also recognizing that in a service-oriented world, both the outcome realization, box number 8, and the way customers capture value is fairly unique. So I put those into separate boxes. We're going to go through this in more detail. In fact, we're going to sort of draw a parallel of this with the original Osterwalder service model, the original Osterwalder business model canvas. So this is Ojicello's diagram. And in here, we've got, again, 4 different areas, very much like the Osterwalder model. The first area, which we have in green, is the customer-facing component. And these boxes are really about capturing the customer value and how they benefit in context from things that are happening and the outcomes that they need to create. So we haven't got necessarily a product. We've got an outcome that we're managing to, and we have a customer outcome and a stakeholder outcome that we want to take into account. I provide a great example of this in the book Digital Momentum. We look at an insurance company and their co-providers working with a customer. You know, they buy car insurance, but maybe you're in a place like where I am, Winnipeg, with slippery snow and tires, and you want to give them a discount if they get snow tires. We can capture that in beneficiaries and context. I benefit as a customer as well as the seller of the snow tires. So it's not just digital stuff, it's also physical stuff, but it can be both. We want to talk about relationships and engagement. Who owns the customer relationship? How is it managed? How does the customer work through the ecosystem? Do they meet up with other customers? And there are a lot of examples where a lot of times what we're doing is a social thing. If I meet up with other people, there's perceived increased value. So how do I manage that? Number 6, how do I manage the touch points and channels? And finally, in the context of using and co-creation, how do I see value in what I'm doing? This is the green box that covers customer-facing stuff. The second box we talk about is co-creation and ecosystems. And that's I guess, what color is that? That'd be blue, I guess. A little bit colorblind. Here we want to capture service capabilities. So we're actually, instead of mapping resources and activities independently, we look at building capabilities. It's an improvement, I think, over Osterwalder, and that as architects, we realized that organizations need to capture people, process, and technology working together to provide some functional benefit. And also the idea that these capabilities may themselves morph to provide better outcomes over time. They may be dynamic. We have value co-creation activities. So we want to understand where people and other vendors and maybe AI agents come together to do things. And the number one box in there in the blue is understanding how we work with our ecosystem partners. Are we an orchestrator or are we a supplier? What's our role? And do we have a strategy to change that to produce more value? Remember, suppliers, they produce items, but they're also the lowest value provider in an ecosystem typically. We next have the operational enablement, and there's two parts to that. One is outcome realization. How do we tie in customer behavior and their outcomes with our objectives and key results? How do we align the two of these? Keeping in mind that numbers like lagging indicators like profit are great for the company, but we also want to understand the customer perspective. Is there engagement? Are the customers happy? Are they working in groups? There's a whole bunch of customer measures that we could go into detail, and we do have a seminar that really dives into this in more detail. And then we talk to value capture and sustainability. How in a customer touch point do we deliver value? And what are those touch points? And how does that work with revenue? And then finally, we have the purple line, which talks about the revenue model and the cost structure. And what we're doing here is we're looking at how do we make sure that our revenue model captures the value that we're creating, and how do we pay for it in a way that delivers value and that we as a company get a lot out of this. So we've kind of went through these already in detail, and this is actually the next. If we look at the next few slides, they just cover what I just covered. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. They're just detailed blow-ups of each of the different areas that we've talked about. And what we have, if we look at this idea of going from an operating model, how do things change? This summarizes a lot of what we've talked about. This summarizes the idea of products to outcomes, the idea that in a product sale, you buy it, you're done with, very transactional, but what we're moving towards is building relationships and sets of transactions. And what's interesting about this, an interesting observation is, if you're an integration architect, this is a great source of understanding where integrations start and how they add value to outcomes. So I think we're going to see this whole idea with integration architecture shift and really start in value delivery of outcomes and relationships in ecosystems, right? With traditional enterprise, we would do a business model canvas for maybe a department. Here, we're looking at an ecosystem, and we're probably going to do a service canvas for each customer segment are unique, and we want to capture those unique elements of the customer segments. In a traditional enterprise, their outcomes are usually bound, or delivery of products are usually bounded by projects with scope. Here, we want to move more of a continuous adaptation so that our products can have features that provide value to clients and maybe even on an ongoing basis. The technology foundation for products is definitely systems of record. With intelligence in this old way of thinking, maybe we're looking at those systems of record to enhance them with systems that understand information and help us with decision making. But as we move to this new world, it's all about systems of engagement and intelligence. How do we make that experience easy for the customer? And how do we embed intelligence with this? And then we go from delivery and periodic change to this idea of co-creation and continuous delivery. So I provided an example. This is in the book. I'd recommend, if you do get the book, go into it. And the last 3 chapters cover a company called CoCover that's evolving from today's world into a more forward-looking digital momentum world that's resilient and changeable. And one of the things they wanted to do is deliver better customer service. And so we talked about specific things that they can do. Today we talk about insurance products as policies. As a customer, I go in, I insure my car, and if it sits in the garage, I've paid for the policy and that's it. Well, we can open up the door now if we start thinking about usage. Imagine an insurance policy where you only pay when you drive your car, so that the road trip time is built right into the policy. Imagine that when you get your policy, you are insured for different things depending where you are. So it becomes a very dynamic idea of a policy, and also the costing becomes dynamic with it. And I actually interact with other people, and we go through an example where this could be the case. And these are things that insurance companies are looking at today. Is how can we get more fine-grained delivery to add value? Because on the one hand, there's the paradox that it will save a customer, overall money, but on the other, through usage, will also make more money because they'll pay for specific items that they're delivering. And we talk about this idea of building transactional relationships. This happens a lot in say an environment like Manitoba, where we have co-insurance providers that want to work with the provincial insurance. And so how do I deal with a client? And a lot of times I won't even go into an insurance office. I will go into one of the co-insurance providers, and they will have other services that they can add value to. And we can move to more of a ongoing relationship. I'm not going to go through every point here, but you kind of get the idea that it opens up possibilities when we start to capture these ideas on something like a service canvas. This is a summary of some of the architectural concepts that are going to be impacted as we work forward on these things. And I'm just going to hit about three of the top ones. The first one is we need to realize that our integration points need to be broadly more composable. And so we don't know what the future necessarily holds, but we need to architect for it. And so we see a preference for things like event-driven systems. We see a preference for things like APIs and platform strategies that are composable. And we also look for integration approaches that build shared workflows and integration patterns. And I talk to a lot of this both in the book and the upcoming integration course, so that we can look at technology fundamentals that support what we're trying to do. We can look at outcome measurement, telemetry, and observability. So today, we look at this very much from a product sales perspective. I look at, did somebody look at the product? Clicks on the website. Well, this needs to flip to other measures, including measures of how the ecosystem might be working with how our ecosystem partner might be working with other ecosystem partners. How cohesive is that ecosystem? And and is it living up to its measure as a platform, so that the customer isn't forced to move to different ecosystems? And I think a big one that I'm going to end off with on this slide is trust. Trust is going to be paramount. People, as things go into the background, want to trust them. And that means security needs to be front and center. And if you had a chance on June 18th, we're going to be having a discussion on what some of that means. I hope you can join that. We've got some great speakers coming to that. But again, it's really going down to, what does trust really mean in the modern world? How do we architect that into our service environments? Some key takeaways. Outcomes are first, values co-created. The service logic is meant to capture a lot of these ideas, and it extends the ideas of the business model canvas. We're ecosystem oriented towards continuous adaptations, and our foundations for integration are composable. 2 follow-ups, if anybody's interested, please inbox me. One is a detailed service logic business model canvas course, and the other one is an ecosystems and agentic strategy course that will be coming soon. I really appreciate that you stayed with me so far, that you listened. And now, is there any questions? Paul, how are you doing this? Are you going to gather questions from the audience, or are you going to just jump in here? Or how do we do the live Q&A? Hello.
There's my face. Sorry. So they always getting used to the new this or the new UI. Yeah, and it's where's that? Okay, sorry about that.
I think you're just coming out. There was a bit of an echo there. I think you're okay now.
Yeah, I'm streaming you on 3 platforms. I'm that interested to double check that everything was working. So, comments and questions will come over the chat if there are any.
Okay.
Because we're live streaming, so there's not a meeting in the background where other people can comment or can join and ask questions live. So any questions will just go into the chat. I see that that Roman is on from Leadership in the Built and lots of other places. But so I wanted to start with a question. You talked about jobs to be done, but you didn't talk about jobs to be done. So I'm
Oh,
curious where Clay Christensen's work fits in for you.
yeah, that's actually critical. So when I was talking about the customer journey and capturing those touch points, a lot of times they're going to coincide with jobs to be done. And I would say that's a subset of your touch points. So there's really three types of things that are going to happen on that customer journey. One, I'm at a point where I'm just looking for information. It's literally like going up to like a kiosk and going, where do I go in this ecosystem? And at that point, what's my feeling? What are the emotions? Am I giving them the right information? And that's also related to the steps I need to take to get a job done, right? So it's part of their planning to get somewhere, right? A second thing, of course, is the delivery of some service. How do I coordinate the people that I need to deliver that? And that's going to be, again, may involve, a job to be done, but with multiple people coordinating that. Like I may have another customer I want to deal with. There may be a couple of companies involved. Sort of like doing the policy and having my lawyer present when I do it to make sure I'm getting good advice. I want to make sure everybody's involved. And finally, we want to really understand all the points in the ongoing relationship. So it's not just a single, the job to be done isn't by a product. It's an ongoing, refreshing kind of thing.
Okay, so break down for me though, because so we have this conversation on multiple scopes. Um, and then we'll ask Roman's question. One scope is, of course, ecosystem level thinking. Yeah, but that's a very hard scope to get access to, right? The vast majority of the architecture
Yeah.
practice doesn't work in that scope, right?
Well, it's got to though.
Or
That's
they
the problem, Paul. It's not. That's where the customer works, right? The customer lives in the ecosystem, and that's the challenge, right? Is how do we tap into it? Like when I'm trying to go on a vacation, I have a bunch of stuff I need to do, and I'm going to a lot of different companies. And you're right. Up till now, they've architected it in a product centric way, a bunch of different companies, and they haven't looked at it from an ecosystem perspective. And that's on the one hand, it's the opportunity and the risk, because as the customer, whoever puts that together for me is going to be the person I deal with, right? And so that's, I think, the real challenge. And you're right, a lot of it is product centric today.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean that if I've got 250 architects, they're not all working on a service canvas, right? They're working on projects, they're working on specific product teams, et cetera. So my question was, how do I, business model canvas is the same problem in the sense of business capability models have the same thing. It's,
Oh, yeah.
we have 10 of them, but we don't have 250 different service canvases. So the question becomes, how do I action this, right, in an architecture team of any given size? Is it 5 people? How do I start? Do I put this solution architecture description set? How does an architect team of the total one, does an infrastructure architect care? And if so, how? How do they attach to this intellectually, emotionally, but mostly by the work they do connected to this thinking? So in your perspective.
That's a really broad answer. And I would say that we don't do anything different than we're doing today in the sand. And that's a partial answer, because we haven't quite solved that problem today entirely, I don't think, with the business model canvas.
I don't think
right?
we've solved it at all. So don't get me wrong. I was hoping you'd come in with a, like a, an E equals MC squared, and we go, oh, that's the answer. Something, but no, and this, I see this all the time in work related to business architects and the other architects, right? So you had a list in there of stuff that we have, other canvases that we have in the Bitterbox, right? Whether
Right.
they're, balance scorecards, customer journeys, the value stream analysis, the benefits realization, the jobs to be done,
Yep.
all of those artifacts. What we still haven't really connected to, or what I'm trying to understand is, if I've got 500 projects to improve our digital technology stance, yes,
Yep.
that are funded, and I have a next year's funding stream, how do I connect this? Is I mean, clearly this is a brilliant, absolutely essential thinking pattern. But how do I connect it to the real work? And like it's sort of like if this is maturity level 5 you're describing, I want to talk about what does maturity point five look like? Like what's the first step out of the
Yeah.
gate?
I think to broadly answer the question, and we go more into it in some of the coursework, but to broadly answer it, I think if you start today in a product company and you ask a really simple question, how do I deliver that business model canvas and the results that are for capabilities that are pointed to in there? Essentially what you're doing is you're translating that business model to a set of features, if you like, called capabilities that you want to deliver in your organization that it needs to provide, right? So I mean that's the first step. And that's no different in a service world. It's a set of, well, what capabilities do I need to deliver to support my involvement in these ecosystems? The difference being that in a product world, I just come up with one set. In the customer-oriented world, I need to consider multiple canvases and consolidate them together into a set of capabilities. I need to prioritize them. I may look at a customer journey for one customer segment and go, that's too small for me. That may be the way I compete in the ecosystem. I may not provide services for it. I may tend to provide more services for other segments. But these all become strategic decisions that we can make now that we haven't been making up to date. So the short answer is there's really 3 levels that we need to look at. One is how do we translate corporate strategy and understand where we want to play in the ecosystems? The second level, as an architect, how do I understand my business modeling as a business architect? And then the third area is how do I go from strategy to execution? And to do that, I would suggest capabilities are front seat players, but we need more work. There's more complexity there. And certainly you don't want everybody, I think everybody needs to understand that traceability to value from a customer perspective. And I think they even try to do it in a business model canvas world of today. It's just we don't do a great job of it. We just need to do a better job. So it's really extending what we're doing today, building those systems out and moving towards an idea that I think we're moving towards continuously massaging the features that our business presents to that ecosystem and how to manage that versus having points in time. I think that's the biggest change, so that the architects become more involved in, at the end of the day, when I test what I've delivered, you talk about experimentation. The ultimate experiment is how well does it work in an ecosystem?
So tell me, how do we get started? Tell us about the book. What's your How do people get more access to this? Is the service canvas going to be in the BitBook? Are you submitting it, or
That's a great idea, Paul. Yeah, we could put the service canvas in the BitBook. It's not in the book. What the book deals with, it's a little bit more assuming that you've had a service canvas. So I don't really in the book go into the depth that I would go to and how to use the technique. Rather, the book talks more to the North Star vision, the need for a North Star vision, and what goes into creating a business model that's service oriented. So how do I deal in a service dominant world? It talks about the changes that are coming architecturally, and the book really elaborates a lot more. In fact, it really elaborates a lot more on the question you just asked. That's really the essence of the book, is how do you get architects to think about a future in changing in a way that is customer oriented, changing in a way that is looking towards, the adoption of new technology and things like that. The book is available on Amazon. I think either the Kindle version or the softcover version are both really affordable. It goes into more detail on how to use these things. And it also covers examples like CoCover, how a company can evolve from today's state and mature using the concepts in digital momentum. And among those concepts, what we can do to move it closer to service dominant logic and provisioning that for customers.
Okay. So the book is Digital Momentum. It is, and how do I do this? Show. Oh, that's not it. Where is it? Stop. Oh, I have to do a new share.
Okay.
All right, there's the platform. Digital Momentum by Bryce Ominsky. Um, and I've got a little forward in the book. I definitely recommend reading it.
And I
It
love
goes
the
a
way in your forward you pointed something out. It's time to have this dialogue, and that's what the book is about. There's changes coming. What's the discussion that we need to have around them as architects? So, Roman,
well.
to your question, great context in the book. I definitely get it. And then to your earlier question, Paul, yeah, a lot's in the book, and let's have more of a dialogue. I'd love to see comments when this is posted. Happy to engage in that. It's not like, oh, we've got everything worked out clearly. I've applied some of this to some of my clients, and every
Mhm.
time we do it, there's some element that comes up which is like, oh, that's interesting. We need to consider that. And the risk is that it's interesting, but the real benefit is that we're thinking about things in a way that gives us competitive advantage that we haven't thought about them before.
You know how big a fan I am of these tools. And speaking as I consider myself a software architect at heart, right? I like building software, I always have. Um, what I feel is the challenge, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. It's not that we don't know what we should do. And we see this in sustainability, we see this in skills acquisition, we see this in what architects should be like. What we have a problem with is distribution of those shoulds into real environments, right? Like the shoulds don't take hold or haven't. In a recent survey that I did, or interviews I did for a couple of years in the CAF, I found that the vast majority of architecture practices are not really connected in any way. Business architects don't talk to solution architects, don't talk to cloud architects, don't talk to information architects. They talk to them. I'm talking about lunch and stuff, yes. But in any realistic day in and day out driver sense, this isn't on the agenda of the solution software architect community. They don't know the business at all. And the business architects don't connect it in well into those change. So what do we need to do to get, and more importantly, the clients of the people who are architects don't demand it, right? They don't roll them into strategic conversations. So how can we use this as a lever to begin changing that reality in your mind?
Wow, that's a hell of a question. And we're in a hell of a state, by the way, too, which is interesting. A lot of companies come in and you nailed it. Like there's architects on the front lines doing technology that have no idea why they're delivering a particular technology in some cases. And what can we do? Well, the first thing is the stuff the book is written about is based on fundamentals. And as an architect, we need to the fundamental concept to me. And if you disagree, jump up and down, or if you agree, jump up and down, Paul. But I think we need to understand the outcomes that we're delivering from a value
Mhm.
point of view and how the technology delivers those outcomes, and recognize that our technology choices are inextricably connected to the outcomes that we produce. And you can't go to an architect and have them deliver something, even something like an integration, without understanding how it's going to be used. I think that's fundamental. So what does an architect do to get this? First, I recommend that the ISA Global Foundations. Make sure you understand basic terminology. Everything in this book is based on it extends basic terminology. It's not meant to replace it. It extends ideas that are talked about by ISA Global. It extends ideas that other groups have talked about, and that's the first thing. Two, get used to build that muscle in practice. How do I go from strategy to execution? Well, I start to look at what outcomes I need, and I start to have that dialogue with the C-suite. Can you imagine if Netflix had never had a conversation about the ideas of using streaming technology? I'm not going to say our world would be different, but Netflix would not have made the money they made, right? And why aren't we still having those conversations? Somebody's going to have them. It's whether you're having them, whether you can do it or not. And that's where I think organizations like ISA Global really play a role. I think understanding. I think the other thing too for me that was really big when I had a colleague comment about the book, and he says, "Well, how can you see the future? It all became because of some microchip changes. Like, how can you see past that?" And the answer is, you see the future by looking at what you want and the trends that we're following. And I think architects need to do more of that and not get hung up on the minutiae of particular technology that's here today. Because guess what? In 5 years, it's going to be completely different. We know that.
Yeah, we do, don't we? Uh, if nothing else, there'll be so much more of it that will be different, right?
It truly is exciting. Like, it's a plethora of technologies. It's like a smorgasbord. What do I feel like? Oh, I feel like a little bit of quantum today, a little bit of AI tomorrow, and there you go.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna flip the question because I think we have time for one more. Yeah. So I'm gonna flip the question. We didn't see the emergence of consumer grade protections for media products, industrial products, et cetera, until the emergence of industrial grade manufacturing. TV had
Yep.
been around for a while. So you didn't see those protections in place. You mentioned Netflix, yeah, as well as I live in Europe, and so there's a lot of conversations about the impact of the tech companies on people, really. What can I begin to do with this service-based thinking? What does this imply about not just customer I call it customer obsession, if you will, right? That's my favorite
Yes.
term, is just being obsessed with the people using your value proposition. Yeah. But if we start to look at this a different way, what will be how do we quantify that world where technology and these services will be competing, but also regulated? Like, what is it? Let's look at this from a 5 years from now perspective and say, or 7 or 10 or whatever, right? We've got the AI Act coming. We see literally Harvard. Was it Harvard? I think it was Harvard's graduation speech, and I may be wrong. It might have been, but it was Stanford. Sorry, I think it was Stanford. Yes, where the guy, the literally the commencement speech guy got up and said, "F you to AI."
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right?
okay, yeah.
That was how he started it. And again, if I got the school wrong, I was enjoying the speech, not and I didn't look at the. I think it was Stanford, but the point being, where you start seeing mass reactions to companies. And I mean, we've coined the term "shitification" now as a legitimate term. Yeah. So this was kind of what I was hinting at the beginning. What do you think we can do today? Like, if I just go work on something, how can I use this to to avoid being one of those companies that get shitified, that the clients hate their use of technology, which I think is more common than it is rare. So do you understand? Do you see what I'm after? Like, how can I
Yeah,
start
so
using this to think 5 years down the road about that?
I think there's a few issues at play here that you're touching on, Paul. And I think that to me, the top issues out of this, one is you're in systems that we don't know what the outcomes are necessarily, how they're going to play out. And it's funny you use the word obsession. There's that new YouTube movie out now, Obsession, where this person, wishes for something fairly mundane, but what they wish for, they get, and it turns into a nightmare. And we see this too with the 3 laws of robotics with Asimov, right? Where the robots interpret those laws strictly in a way that locks society down and not the right interpretation. And I think we need to be very careful that we're not creating systems that do that on the one hand. So it's about outcomes. Do I have a valid outcome? And is this outcome within acceptable parameters? I think we're going to be looking at a lot at ethical simulation going forward. I talk about that in my book. The second part to this is about tribalism. And different tribes are going to have very different ideas about how to interpret this. We're seeing that a lot, in North American politics. Well, in European, everywhere now. It's what do I make
China
available?
too.
Yes, China.
Yeah, big
Oh, I
time.
don't.
Yeah, completely different tribal belief system about technology's
Yeah.
involvement in life. Yeah, I love this conversation. It's such an important one.
So the tribalism, right? And how do you deal with it? And the answer is not what people want to hear. But the answer is that we need to make our decisions not based on tribalism and recognize that some people are going to be really upset by the decisions that we make, and other people are going to really like it. But I think we do need to keep them open. And again, we need to set boundaries that make sense and go, does the outcome of this decision break one of those boundaries? Let's step in and do it.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
like you can't stop how to design a nuclear bomb. That knowledge is out already. If we wanted to, I'm sure anybody on this call could do it. But we want to make sure that if we see that happening, we stop it, and that there's a guideline in place that maybe we stop it and we let somebody know that we have a stockpile that they need to take care of for us and get rid of, that we can't manage the uranium or something. So we want to identify, and I think that's the third thing in this, is identifying early warning indicators. So when we do these simulations, these ethical simulations, we're going to see early signs or precursors that something's happening. So we need to recognize it. Right now, we did not recognize social media and the impact it has on us, and it's gone too far. And there were no early warning signs for us to look at and go, this is happening. Now we're all of a sudden in it. What are those warning signs? I think we need to start thinking about that ethically a little bit more. How do you recommend
I
I
got
use generative?
yeah, I got a really hands-on question here by Rafelk 3246. How do you recommend to use generative AI Codex Claude with your value proposition?
Wow, that is a huge answer. So, to start off, I think you really hit the nail on the head. You can't go in and say, I'm gonna flip that a little bit around into how I wrote my book and used AI to write my book. The thing I didn't do is go into it and say, Claude, please write me a book on this. I started that way and I got complete nonsense. So that's not the right way to do it. I think it has to be very targeted, right? I mean, this is not, you've got to have very targeted points that you're going for. Right now, the context window compared to a human being of a lot of these tools is very small. And you need to keep that in mind. When I do stuff, I use different tools for different things. For instance, if I'm trying to do general research, I'll use ChatGPT. If I want to then do an image, I tend to pull out Gemini to do the image to help me with it. And so I also recognize which features are useful to do what. Um, I recommend that you set it to do. So the answer I'm going for is specific objectives. What are you trying to code? Do you need to do deep dives in something to get that code working? Is there a pattern that you want to understand? I think those tools are excellent to do that and help realize that. If you say, write me an application without thinking about it, man, I think you're going to get in big trouble really fast. Because I now the application world, Paul, you've done some interesting stuff there, but I can also attest. I've done sort of write me an application, and I've gotten some very good results, and then sometimes it's very trivial. So the final thing is, we need to test what we're doing and understand qualitatively what we have before we go into the wilds. And I see that as a verification and validation activity. Long answer, Raphael. Love to go more. Probably it's like 2 hours long, the full answer. Great discussion. Maybe
Well,
we
I've
can
got a
continue that. Yeah.
I would love to actually, and this one, Bryce, I'd love to get your service blueprint canvas into the Bitterbuck for this reason, because one of the things that I'm doing, I'm literally just as we speak, I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I know we're over time, but hey, like, no one's going to sue
Well,
us.
Paul, as you're doing that, I do have an
Let me
article
see.
coming where I look at 3 patterns, including one from Digital Momentum.
Mhm,
And I'd love to make that available, and,
mhm.
and then, like you're saying, get the service blueprint canvas into the Bitterbuck. I'm really, really for that.
What well, I think what I'd love to talk to you about, because what we've done is we actually have a Bitterbuck MCP server now, and what Claude is doing right now, and you can see I said, "Please review the customer journey from the Bitterbuck and create a customer journey for ISA membership working with ISA-related learning." Now, that's just a scenario because we have members and they learn from us, etcetera. But you can imagine working with a media company or a hospital company or whatever, and the service blueprint. What the Bitterbuck really represents is, in many ways, a huge RAG system, right? retrieval augmented generation. It has a very strict meta model in the sense of how these concepts relate to each other, customer journeys or personas or whatnot. And I think this is what my hope is that we see more of this working with AI as a partner to, it's gone through here and it's said, let me figure out what I can do with the Bitterbuck. Let me get articles on that from, Bryce, from Martin Fowler, from wherever, on this topic, right? Then let me get that Canvas result. And you can see it gets a full description of the Bitterbuck Canvas from that, and then is able to then begin generating it. Now, it will take Claude a while to generate this. I did a decision record for a cloud selection the other day, a Bitterbuck one, and it takes a while for it to really generate even one canvas, much longer, I think, than it would you or me. And it's not great, but it is in many ways innovative. It's like, oh, I didn't think about it from that angle. So it's kind of like having a partner in there that reads everything, that doesn't really think like a human, but it can kind of stimulate your thinking and generate stuff. And then, hopefully what we'll be doing is getting better and better at that. So I do think that there's an awful lot of opportunity to effectively get these better customer, these better customer outcomes, working sessions. And you can see it's kind of got the entire canvas there. Obviously, it's all squinchy, so I can't really show it all. But the point is that it generates a pretty accurate customer journey according to the spec. So hopefully your service design canvas will turn into an international standard, the way business model canvas has, the way customer journeys have. And let me see if I can download it, maybe open it in a window or something.
And as you're doing this, Paul, I think the other thing you're pointing out, which is really critical, you asked an earlier question that there's an obvious answer coming out of this. As you start to go into situations with 50, say 30 customer segments, and I need to consolidate all this stuff, we're going to need to use AI to do that, right? And I think that what you're doing is tying into the Bitterbuck and having prompts aligned with that. We need to understand it ourselves, but we need to facilitate these ideas. And I don't want to be involved in the grunt work and going across 20 canvases, cutting and pasting. That was fine 30 years ago, right? When I just learned, I moved from comic cartoons to this, but no, I want this to do a lot of the automated work, right? And that's what you're presenting here, is something that can take a lot of time off our hands, a lot of the architecture diagramming off of our hands, right?
Yeah, and I think well, for me, it's the integration with being able to. I guess it's the quality that I'm looking for. It's remembering everything everywhere is really hard, and being able to initially connect things across our entire stack, of the Bitterbuck, is quite difficult, right? I want to be able to I want to have something I can work with, not against. And let me just show you this output real quick. I'm trying to find my actual
while you're pulling that up, where can people find the video of this? Is this going to be made freely available? Is there a place people can go to see this? Will it be on Netflix?
So it will be on Netflix. You will be famous. It's my promise, right? You're already famous, right? So sorry, and I'm just literally I've got so many windows. I am not actually able to find our event window here. Where are you? I'm just looking for the streaming so that I can reshare this. Okay, let me show you where this is, and I'll show you the output and where the event will be, the recording will be, and it'll be up in a day or so. I literally have so many browser windows open, though. I can't find the event browser window. Hold on just a second for me.
I hear you. I have a few screens here, and I try to put so many windows per screen. and then it gets flooded, and then that's it. They cascade. I lose everything. So I'm completely with you, Paul.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking for one tab on 4 windows, each of which have 50 tabs open, and it's this tab, and I have managed to somehow lose the, the stream tab. There it is. I was in the same one. Okay, now I got it. Sorry. It's always fun when that happens. I think I have managed to make every possible webinar mistake in the world. Sometime I think we've been doing these for a long time. So this was Claude's output, right? This was the stages that it created. How they discover our website, what they investigate, what they when they join, how they access, how they learn and engage, how they would advance and renew. And you can see emotional mindset. Now, obviously, the challenge here is that it makes all this up, right? So it makes up every one of these quotes. So we'd have to go replace that. Obviously, it makes up the entire friction points and things of that nature. Now, for your webinar, but I still think that's quite cool, right? In the sense that we can even get that beginning place. Now, for this webinar, for those of you who didn't catch it live, you will be able to download the recording, and I'm just going to re-share here. Yes. You will come to the Learn environment. You will have to be an ISA member. All of these are free. Our webinars are free to attend live, but they will mostly be Explorer level content, and that means that they will show up here. You can see our previous, some of our previous video content is available in the different What's New categories, and there's just hundreds of videos available. Bryce's video will be shown under that Learn video as the top video hopefully by tomorrow, if not by the first thing the next day.
And from what I understand, it's the first live recording we've done of the series. So
Yes.
move over, Johnny Rivers. There's Secret
Yeah,
Agent.
yeah. No,
there's products to outcomes now too.
We are going to have 52 of these minimum a week. I'm going to brand it ISA TV, Architect TV. You know, like we've got some stars that are going to be doing things in modern architecture, Mahela's work, in in-depth software and integration, in cloud native, in AI, in sustainability, in chief architect levels, in business architecture. I mean, we have so many amazing speakers coming. I don't even know how to talk about it. And that brings us to this one last announcement, which is next 2 weeks from now, we will have Mr. Daryl Carr will be talking to us. Yes, I know. See, even Bryce goes, wow. Daryl Carr and his book on community of practice. Sorry, I had this tab up in my other event. Community Considerations is Daryl's new book. And this is on building professional communities of practice inside of organizations. So it's 17 hard lessons learned on building out the communities of practice, how to get people together, architects, etc. So Daryl will be joining us at 8 a.m. CEST. So you may be asleep when he's presenting because he's Perth based in Australia, but I'm lucky enough he's going to do it at 8 a.m. CEST, and then of course it'll be recorded and available for those who can't attend. So Daryl's book is awesome. I highly suggest it. Bryce, thank you for today. What a great kickoff. What a cool idea. So much to see and for people to work on. Anything next for you that you want to announce? Is there anything upcoming that you want to let our viewers know about?
First of all, thank you, Paul, for having me today. I really enjoyed the discussion. Next items, there's going to be a lot more webinars coming up, a lot more items. So please connect with me on LinkedIn and keep posted. And also a lot of stuff happening with ISA Global. So let's talk on the platform there. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all. Have a beautiful day, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Hey, there we go. There's two of me.